Okay.
Welcome to Unexpected Points. I'm your host, Kevin Cole. I'm joined today by a special guest, Ed Fang of the Power Rank. Ed and I mean, in internet terms, we go back a decent amount. Ed was kind enough to take me under his wing at the Sloan Sports Analytics Conference, where he seemed to know everyone a number of years ago, introduced me to a bunch of people, made that an excellent, awesome experience. And he also does excellent, awesome work predicting NFL, college football, NBA. What else we got going on over there? Soccer. What else we got going on over there?
We have lots of stuff, but mostly American football right now. I was about I thought you were about to say somehow that I took you under my wing for analytics, and I was like, no, you did all your wonderful work by yourself. I don't think I've ever we've had great conversations, but I didn't know more people at Sloan the first time you came. So yes, that was a lot of fun to introduce you around.
Well, I'm notoriously socially anxious, I guess, maybe a bit. It may not seem like that, but under the hood, there's a lot of stuff going on. It's kind of one of those things where it's like I could talk to this person or I could not talk to this person. Heavily leaning towards the latter, towards the latter. If I could make any excuse in my head not to do so, but having you following you around, and you're like, you're networking, you're out there, you're pressing the flesh, you're talking to all these different groups of people. I can just work in that way, and that was helpful.
When I am here in Ann Arbor, when I'm walking around town, I feel the same way that you do. I don't necessarily want to talk to everyone, and I kind of shy away from certain conversations. But I feel like if you're going to spend money and you're going to get on a plane to go to Boston, then I'm ready to go, right? Like I'm ready to do the thing, like promote the business, make connections. So I think everyone kind of feels like that sometimes.
Okay, well, checks in the mail, commission based upon helping me do the same via you. So thanks for that. I kind of had a loose agenda for what we may talk about, and we've had the bomb drop. It didn't take fully 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Just took 2 weeks now for the warning signals to go up about passing in the NFL, that it's dead. Defenses are supreme. Everyone has theories for what they should do. Shockingly, most people's theories for what offenses should do mimic their theories for what offensives should be doing a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Pretty much ever since they've had a take, it's been the same exact take the entire time. I'm trying to think of some new ways that teams could evolve. So let's first start by a man who evokes many different emotions here, normally in the draft sphere, but he's really ramping up the takes recently, and that's Mel Kiper when he piped in here about believing too high safety should be outlawed. is the title here. How many people watched the video or not? I'm not sure, but we're going to play a clip here of Kiper talking, and then we'll kind of react based upon this, because this really was the jump off point for a lot of people to start talking about this topic, and everyone having to give their opinion, including me, of course. If you're a thought leader, you got to give your opinion on this topic. Here is Kiper with his rant.
Mel, pick it up from there. Now that we've sort of set the table for exactly what your problem is with it, how would you try and solve it?
Well, I grew up with the best of the National Football League, 60s, 70s, into the 80s. You're talking about deep shots, right? The go route, the 9-route post. You're talking about Terry Bradshaw in a Super Bowl hitting John Stallworth. You see Leroy Irvin diving, right? Just off his finger. There's the receiver. They laid it out there, right? Hit the receiver in stride. 65-yard touchdown. It's a beautiful thing to watch. That's what I want to see brought back to the National Football League. Okay, check down kings, bubble screen sensations, boring football. Game manager, I get it, but I want to see those deep shots. That's what the NFL was built on. I grew up with John Unitas, Fran Tarkington, Ken Stabler, Darryl LaMonica.
Okay, is he getting paid per name that he's quoting out here? Because this guy is really listing off everyone on the planet. Darryl LaMonica, though, perhaps the best nickname of all time. You know, the Mad Bomber, Darryl LaMonica. Yep. So I'll give him credit for that.
You know, you talk about quarterbacks, Joe Namath. It was just right. Brett Favre when he was doing what he did. Burt Jones with the Baltimore Colts. You think about those quarterbacks who would throw the ball down the field. I'd say what Bradshaw did with Stallworth and Swan, Roger Staubach. That's what I.
He's still going. He's still Staubach. You know, I don't know about that as much as the Bombers, but I'll give him Bradshaw. Okay, let's continue.
Want to see brought back. Say, well, you can't do that, right? Well, you got a 5-yard rule with the cornerbacks, right? The Mel Blount rule, right? Now with the push thing with Hurts, you got to be a yard back now. So don't tell me you can't have those safeties closer to the line of scrimmage than they are. I was at games where I'm thinking, hey, too high? They're out in outer space. I couldn't even find us. So they're playing with 9 guys, right? Where are the other 2? Oh, the other 2, they're so daggone far back, I didn't even know they're part of the damn play. I'm telling you.
First of all, Greg Williams is offended by this when he used to have his deep safety play like 70 yards back, and off the screen looked like it was in punt formation. But okay, let's continue.
We got to change this thing, and we got to have, hey, you can warn them. Enough for, they come up, hey, guys, you got to get up a little bit, right? You're too far back. Warn those safeties, but you got to figure out, competition committee, somebody, Dano, somebody's got to figure out what that depth is, but it's too far back right now. The NFL is being ruined by these too high safeties.
All right. Okay. There's the rant. The NFL is being ruined by too high safeties. Kiper's got his solution, which is, I don't know exactly. I mean, he mentions the 5 yards for the cornerbacks, but that's just like illegal contact. Like you can stand within 5 yards. You can physically be within 5 yards. Okay. Give it to me here, Ed. What do we think about Kiper's somewhat insane solution here of saying, I don't know, I guess you have a hypothetical line on the field and you say only one guy can be back, 15 yards outside of the line of scrimmage. Pre-snap, I mean, post-snap, they could just run back, right? Like, what's stopping them? I don't quite understand this theory, but I like it because it's provocative and it evokes a lot of takes. Go ahead. What do you think, Ed?
I think that was the second time I had heard that today. And this time when I heard it, I was thinking, if you just substituted run the ball instead of like play too high safeties, you could kind of get the same thing, right? Like we need to run the ball in the NFL. Back in the 60s and the 70s, it was all about running the ball and establishing the run and yada, 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 right? I think Mel Kiper is great. I think he's had a great week. His rant about Bryce Young and how Carolina has completely screwed him up, I think has a lot of merit. I think this one has a little bit less merit. I don't know. I think defenses should play the way they do. And, while everyone is complaining about the lack of deep balls, and I actually pulled up some data, Kevin, before as we were talking, 5.92 yards per pass attempt. This is a measure that includes sacks as well. That's down from 6.09 last season. And I'm pretty sure I've seen that number as high as 6.22.
2020 seems to be the high water mark for a lot of passing efficiency metrics and that have gone down steadily, kind of accelerating the decline here in the last year for sure.
Right. And then actually 4.5 yards per carry this season. That's pretty high as well, though I didn't actually check that compared to last season. And I'm also seeing a lot of teams, and we'll get into this later about teams we are either supporting or fading, but a lot of big run plays for a lot of teams like Arizona and Minnesota. Look, this stuff all goes in cycles, right? I guess from an aesthetic point of view, like if you're not going to throw the ball 60 yards down the field, I'm personally okay with that. I really like seeing passes go 10, 15, 20 yards and the receiver catches it in stride. There's nothing boring about that to me at all. And if you're going to play too high safeties, like offenses are going to figure out a way to still move the ball, whether that's shorter stuff, whether that's intermediate passes, whether that's, putting one wide receiver to, just like in soccer, you send your striker right between the two center backs, make them get confused. I think there's got to be a way of sending 2 or 3 receivers far up the field in a way that confuses the safeties that will result in some big plays, right? Everything's cyclical. I mean, who knows what Kiper is going to be complaining about 6 months from now, a year from now. I mean, I'm personally not. I'm personally not too worried about it. It doesn't.
Okay,
it doesn't gnaw at me.
Okay, well, I'll have a little bit of a different take here. Well, first of all, I think it's going to be difficult to get into like a lot of solutions here. I'm going to try to talk about some thematic things maybe now, but then also next week. I've already kind of booked an interview to bring Cody Alexander, who runs Match Quarters, which is a Substack. He's kind of really doing he actually knows something, about defenses. But doesn't mean we take them. Doesn't mean we take all of his suggestions and we don't push back against them. But he's also an analytics friendly sort of guy. So I'm gonna talk to him a bit, try to run through my ideas, some of them galaxy brained, for solutions going forward. But what I think is interesting in this discussion is, again, it's not even what Kiper said. It's the flood of takes that are coming out here, and being able to sort through which ones we can take seriously and which ones we can kind of ignore what's going on here. First, I would say that the cyclical thing, it is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine to talk about the cyclical nature of the NFL, only because if you take basically from the West Coast offense being introduced-ish, that sort of era, early 80s, let's say, through 2020 was, again, that's the high watermark that we're talking about here. While there were some blips, I would say, along the way of passing efficiency, there were some rule changes, obviously, that have come into play to help passing efficiency, like the illegal contact, the holding, things of that nature. It's been a bit of a one-way street going in the side of higher passing volumes, higher passing efficiency, again, with blips. I do wonder if this is different. And the reason that I wonder if this is different is I think that defenses have changed their fundamental, like, theoretical outlook and focus on what they're trying to do in a way where they just really still bought into this stop the run thing for way too long. And what they've essentially said is now, oh, wait a second, like, it doesn't feel good if the team that's lining up next to us is winning, the physical battle, is pushing things down the field, is gaining 4 or 5 yard chunks time and again. But when we're playing up and we're trying to stop that, we're getting our ass handed to us. They're winning. The offense is winning over and over again. They're getting better. They're scoring more. We can't stop them passing the ball. We need to just finally say we're going to try to stop the pass. We're not going to get motivated out of doing that if they have a few successful runs, and we're going to force them to grind the ball down the field with short passes, with runs, convert third downs. We make them convert third downs rather than having explosive plays down the field. And I think that paradigm has shifted. And if you think about it, this could be a paradigm defensively, the focus of going from really the run ultimately, like they would still get tricked back into it. They'd always talk about it all the time, right? Just recently, who was it? Roquan Smith saying how you stop the Chiefs is you make them one-dimensional. You make them so they can't run the ball. You make them like they can't help themselves, right? Finally, there's been a shift towards stopping the pass with the too high stuff, with the Fangio stuff. It's worked. And we have analytics now coming in by showing everyone how it's worked, where now it becomes more universalized. And that's what analytics kind of does. It like helps people pick out strategies and they become a universal strategy. And it could be the first time in NFL history that defenses have finally truly bought into stopping the pass versus stopping the run.
That definitely could be. I mean, I feel like do you know has there been a shift in, over the past 10 years, there's certainly been a shift in defensive personnel, more secondary players, more cornerbacks on the field.
And they're just lighter too. A lot of the defensive players are just actually way less, even at the equivalent positions. But yeah.
Right. Linebackers that can cover. Mm-hmm. But the two high safeties is more like, look, we're going to play those two fast guys pretty deep. allow everything kind of underneath. I mean, when you were saying what you were saying, Kevin, my thought was like, well, that's pretty smart, right? Like, I mean, if you're a defensive coordinator,
or it
what
was
else are
really
you supposed to
dumb
do?
what they were doing before. Maybe it was really dumb
Yes.
what they were doing before. I think that's more so than anything. I think the offense was ahead of the defense in that it had evolved. Despite what anyone's saying about establishing the run and blah, 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 everyone would always say that, remember Exotic Smash Mouth? That was the Titans of the Mike Munchak back in the day. They're like, oh, we're all going to, the cycle's coming. We're all going to move back to the run. Never happened. Kept on going for the pass. They weren't buying it. Offenses understood a lot earlier, it seemed like, based upon what happened in college and in particular, bleeding over to the NFL, that passing the ball we're getting more yards there. So let's focus on doing that. Like we're scoring more points doing that. So let's focus on doing that. And it just doesn't feel like the defense is actually fully caught up until somewhat recently in saying, you know what, we need to stop that, even if we're allowing more rushing as a downside to the strategy. There's no free lunch, but we're willing to give you an extra 0.1 yards per carry, let's say, in order to bring down your passing yards by a full yard per attempt.
Yeah, I mean, it does depend on what the trade-off is as well. When I was prepping for this today, Kevin, I was looking at some stuff, and one of the things, I have some code that kind of just goes through the play-by-play and pulls out things that are interesting and potentially not reproducible. And one of the things that it pulls out is like rush plays of 10 or more yards. And, we can look at Arizona last week, and I don't know, I'm not sure if the Rams are paying two high safeties more than anyone else. I mean, whatever they did, they didn't really do it that well. But Arizona had runs of 16, 13, 26, 22, 10, 10, and 41 last week. And so, yes, if you're giving 0.1 yards per carry more, that's fine. But if you're regularly getting gashed, then that's probably not good either. So, are we seeing a smarter shift with defenses in these two high safeties? Yes. But everything is going to come to some kind of equilibrium. And I guess for me personally, I don't feel like I'm going to hate that equilibrium. I feel like it's still going to be NFL football, and I'm still going to love it, even if it's not, if Tyreek Hill is not getting the ball 40 yards down the field as much.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily about loving it or not. Although one thing that had happened in football over the years versus maybe what some complaints would have been in baseball for sure, but also basketball and the uniformity of how it's played there was that somehow it wasn't like as attractive.
I mean, that's the basketball thing in particular, I think, is just insane. Like, how can you not? I mean, the old school basketball was like throwing it down to the post to Charles Barkley and watching him back someone down. And now you have the Golden State
what's
Warriors.
interesting is watching some dub. I've been watching some dub NBA. Of course, it's only when Caitlin Clark is playing. Sorry, I'm one of those fans. But like they go down into the paint a lot more. It's more of that sort of thing. And Caitlin Clark is kind of a little bit of an outlier as far as taking these like ridiculous step back threes and other things. It's boring. I mean, it's bad. It's bad when they're going underneath the basket to go to these guys. So yeah, no, I agree with you with basketball. With the NFL, I mean, with major leagues, yeah. I mean, I think there's I think that had been in a slow decline for a long time. But the idea was, I think some people even thought, you know what, if we keep on going this direction of passing, somehow the nerds will kill the NFL by having too much passing because they've killed these other sports with the uniformity of going on there. What they didn't see coming, what I kind of didn't see coming was that maybe as nerds and the ability to get this like feedback loop faster via data has really brought the uniformity to kill the NFL via defense and stopping the pass and getting these defensive coordinators on board to stop the pass, which is making it, I do think the product is a little bit worse if you're scoring fewer points, right?
Okay. Maybe. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
I think temporarily we might see a little bit of a dip in points, although honestly, the new kickoff rules are supposed to result in an increase in points. So I haven't done the calculation. What's that?
It's helping field position so far, no doubt. No doubt. And I guess, but again, to go back to the point of like, I want to ferret out some bad analysis that I've seen out there to help people when they're trying to digest all this stuff. So number one, I still stick with like, this is something that's real because of this like fundamental focus shift. I don't think we've actually seen something like this. So that's kind of my number one point. Cyclical thing, blah, blah, blah. Number two, I would say, is a couple different themes. One is the solution is running the ball offensively. Not like any sort of innovative thinking or anything else. It's just, you know what? They're showing this look, let's run the ball. And I've seen some, I mean, well, whatever. I'll go ahead and say who I've seen out here. But Ben Solak had something on Twitter where he said, maybe I'll share it anyway so people can see, because it got a lot of reaction to it here, where he was saying that the general thought running the ball has never looked easier than these last 2 weeks. The amount of space given by the defensive alignment plus light personnel is crazy. It's good Twitter language to put into here. It's never been easier. It's crazy. Run scheme diversity is peaking too. Passing should be down against looks like these. Run till they stop you. Okay. Why I have a little bit of a problem with this analysis is once you dig into the numbers, and you mentioned 4.5 yards per carry, so that is up. But it's entirely quarterback scrambling more often. So quarterback scramble and they get more yards. You take quarterback scrambles out of that number, and nothing has changed as far as the efficiency of running the ball. It's not any easier to run the ball. The yards per carry is 4.2 versus 4.2 in 2020. The success rate, if you take EPA basis, is around 40%. It was around 40% before. The EPA per play is like negative 0.09 versus negative 0.10. You know, it's almost exactly the same per rush. All these metrics have not really changed a lot. So like there's this feeling, and I think when people just see there's certain defensive formations, they assume you're going to be able to run the ball. That actually hasn't proven to be true. Right. They haven't run the ball, but at the same time, I do think running should be going up, because if you track over time, Chase Stewart did a great chart on this where he looked at the differential in efficiency between running and passing, and as that increases, the pass ratio is almost increased exactly in proportion to that. So, like the running going up is logical only in that you're getting less relative benefit from passing the ball, not that running the ball is easier. So again, that's one piece of bad analysis. I think a lot of people are saying is you just run the ball because it's easier now because of the defensive formations. We actually haven't seen that in the evidence.
No, that's fascinating. I'm sure you replied to these comments out there and gotten lots of positive feedback, right?
Well, I can only do it so much. I can only be that guy so much who just like jumps in and is like, well, actually. So there's that one that I don't like. And then the other thing, and I think this is one of my favorite things that I saw recently, and this is probably where I'm going to come at it like thematically in thinking about this issue going forward, is a friend of the pod, Ben Gretsch, also a big Substack for him. He's like in the top 5, I think, maybe with the Stealing Signals Substack. So he also gets back to me for when I was saying, you know, quarterbacks are running a lot more. That could be part of the pivot, you know, but they're going to get injured a lot. We'll see what ends up happening here. And his whole thing is here, and this is where I think we're going through, is that the reason he doesn't see some sort of running revolution is it's still not optimal. It feels like the answer for teams who don't have other answers, lesser of two evils, but it's but it's what the defense wants you to do. You have to get back to dictating and not reacting. This I like because I feel like a lot of the analysis, and this happens in everything, is that people think back to the past and they're like, oh, you know, if we only had, like there was one from Nate Tice today. Oh man, if offensive line was only getting the practice it was getting in the past and they were playing really well, what would happen? And there's other ones that are like, oh my God, only if we were investing in, you know, training for wide receivers like we used to do in the past. If only we were running like we used to do in the past. If only defenses were then forced to be like they used to do in the past. Well, then you know what we have? If we're doing, you know, all the things we were doing from 10 years ago, we have the NFL of 10 years ago. Is that what's likely to happen? Or what's likely to happen is the West Coast offense gets invented. The air raid gets invented. The Shanahan scheme gets invented and going forward and adopted and going forward. It's like maximizing space and things are going on. We have to start looking forward too much. So much of this analysis is, you know what we do? We just do this thing that worked 5-10 years ago to combat the new defenses that we're seeing now.
Right. I mean, you know, the offenses are going to adapt. I was trying to look up the passing success rate, the way I have it, it doesn't, it's down this year, but I'm not sure that we can attribute 2 weeks of that to too high safeties, right?
Yeah. Well,
NFL
it
coaches,
depends.
well, look, NFL coaches are very good at what they do, like scheming up stuff and getting the most out of their players, right? They're gonna figure it out, and if they don't, they're gonna get fired, and someone else is gonna come into their spot and figure it out, and more intermediate passes, more intermediate routes against these two high safeties, like that seems the most logical thing to me, and. I'm not enough of a tape grinder to know if that's working, but I think again we'll find the equilibrium.
Yeah, there's another theory that I have somewhat that I saw Ben Baldwin was sharing today, and maybe we'll get your take on this too. Is that like we've gone through, I think legitimately, I think it's objectively the best era of quarterback play since basically like 2000 to 2020 sort of era. I mean, I don't think it's just the fact that all the rules have been changed. I think there like legitimately was like there were great quarterbacks coming through that point in time. I have a formula where I try to aggregate value based upon numbers over average for quarterbacks over their careers. So just a lot of guys are near the top. I mean, Peyton Manning and Tom Brady are like 1 and 2. Drew Brees is in the top 5. Aaron Rodgers is in the top 10. Whatever you think of Rodgers now, he's probably not the Rodgers that we saw, back in 2010 to 2015 sort of era. Roethlisberger, Rivers, Tony Romo, he was in there. Matt Ryan was in there. Like you had a lot of guys who were very competent at throwing the ball. The NFL offenses, even as these guys fell off, continued to get better because I think like they were adopting all of these college air raid sort of ideas, which made quarterbacking a lot easier and defenses hadn't caught up. I mean, maybe now the defenses are catching up. You're looking around and you're saying, we got Malik Willis versus Anthony Richardson. On hard mode, you put passing on hard mode, maybe you're not going to see a lot of yards in that sort of game.
Yeah, you're not. And you've seen the Packers resort to running the ball a lot, which I feel like is an easy as long as Malik Willis is starting at the quarterback, right. That seems like
it's like a Band-Aid though. Like I feel like this running the ball thing. I agree that temporarily it might not be the worst solution, but I don't know. It feels a little like you're just trying to cover up an issue that needs a real like cure.
The fact that you don't have a competent backup quarterback, yeah, you're trying to cover that up.
Well, I also think about it in like spacing. I mean, I think it's interesting in the NFL. Like it's all sports. I think sports. Sorry, I got a lot of rants here. Sorry. So I got sports and spacing. Okay, let's think about sports and spacing, right? Like in the NBA. We all know about spacing, how spacing has changed the NBA by bringing everything out. Not only does it allow you to have these 3-pointers, which are worth more, but it also creates more space for layups or very valuable 2-pointers. And teams have started to understand then they implement it further and further, and they get players who are better and better at spacing, at shooting from longer distances and so forth and so on. Soccer, you're a soccer fan, right? Like the old era of just play long ball, boot the ball down the field. Now teams are all like building out from the back. Well, why are they doing that? I mean, maybe they want to retain possession, but more importantly, they want the defense to play up, to come forward so that when they do break the defense, their offensive players have more space on the other side of the field. They're not all clumped in waiting for a header to get flicked forward and then maybe toe poke it past some people. They're trying to create space there. And I think the NFL has been that too. Like that's what offenses, how they were winning is they said, we're going to space it out. We're going to take advantage. Why run the ball and have everyone compact in this line of scrimmage when we can use this entire field for going forward? Well, now the defenses have said, you know what, like there's all this space out there that we didn't have that many players dedicated to that space. Like we should have 2 safeties dedicated to this space out here at all times. So I don't know. I feel like the thing for the offense has to be like, how do we reopen that space again, or try to manipulate the defenders to reopen that space? And I think that's a really interesting question.
Well, but the fact that the 2 high safeties are taking away certain spaces means that they're opening up other spaces. Those intermediate spaces up the field. I think that's what you really need to take advantage of. That intermediate passing seems like the right answer to me, but maybe I don't know. Maybe it's running the ball. Probably not.
I mean, it
Have your
doesn't hurt,
kids
right? It
have
doesn't
your
hurt
kids
in the short
ever
term.
have your kids ever been like, why are they running the football up the middle where everyone is stacked? Your kids ever said that to you?
No, but my kids, like, they just reflexively wonder why teams aren't going for it all the time because I'm always saying go for it. And like, if you come from an era, I mean, like, let's think about this thing. Let's think about this Eagles game on Monday night. Like, they ran a play where Jalen Hurts rolls out, he hits Saquon Barkley right in the hands, and he drops it. Would have been an easy first down. Who knows? He could have just maybe tucked it and ran it for a first down. That's a possibility too. Like you logically look at this play and you're like, oh my God, that was so easy and they blew it. Like, why wouldn't you just do it again? Like, why wouldn't you just do that? Like, that looked pretty easy to continue forward. And I think that's part of it. Is like, if you come at it from a fresh perspective, and all these people are importing all of their ideas from the past on what teams should do. If you come at a fresh perspective, then it's pretty logical. Like, if the defense is telling you we're doing too high, we're giving you strong flashing signals that say, run the ball. We want you to run the ball. Why would the solution be running the ball? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, especially if the numbers aren't going up, like you're saying. So,
I mean, yeah, it's getting better relative. Okay. I have some other ideas. So here's some more ideas. Okay. Mel Kiper accidentally came, in my opinion, came on a theme, which I'm interested in. And this is Galaxy Brain, so it could be completely wrong. So another thing that's been a one-way street forever is the decline in average depth of target for NFL offenses, along with an increase in completion percentage, which, you know, you multiply one times the other. That's how you get yards per attempt, and that's kind of what you're after. And so not only are you getting a higher yards per attempt, you're getting a more consistent play, which, all else being equal, you'd rather average 5 yards an attempt, exactly 5 yards over 4 attempts, than 3 zeros and 120. Like that's better. So it's been going better in that direction. So, so the passes have been getting shorter and shorter. What if? And this is something that I actually got from some film guys. So I'll give Ben Solak some credit here. He was saying, you know what, like go balls, post routes, these things that he's talking about, these actually haven't been affected that much by what's going on with the defense. A lot of the time, it's going to be a receiver versus a defensive back. You're throwing it up there, and they got to make a play, and they got to figure out what's going to happen. What's really been taken away are digs, other kind of intermediate routes where they can catch the ball and they can run afterwards. A lot of these Shanahan scheme sort of routes there. So, like thinking about Terry Bradshaw, he's talking about Terry Bradshaw, right? So Terry Bradshaw won MVP in 1978. He had 28 touchdowns and 20 interceptions, okay? Over his career, he had 212 touchdowns and 210 interceptions. Okay, this is a totally different game. You fast forward to Joe Montana, who in the mid 80s, the West Coast offense, the touchdown rates were staying basically the same, a little bit lower than what we've seen in the past. Interception rates are getting cut in half, if not more than half. There was a revolution there. What if we're willing to throw some interceptions again? What if we're saying, you know what, this low A dot, avoid INTs at all costs. People go crazy when they see an INT. Josh Allen got raked over the coals last year for his interceptions, even though some of them were barely negative EPA because they were like arm punts in certain situations. What if we start to say, you know what, maybe we got to just like create space by running a guy down the sideline and chucking the ball up to him, even if he's covered. Don't just look away to somewhere else. And then all of a sudden they have to start accounting for 30, 40 yards down the field in the air. They have to start accounting for that a little bit more often. Yeah, we're going to get intercepted sometimes, but the benefits we get from stretching them out may start to work underneath and in other places. We need to be so risk averse when it comes to interceptions because our passing offense stinks anyway. So we're not losing as much.
I love it. That decline in interception rate. So in the 70s, I think in that Bradshaw era, like the NFL average was like 5.5. It's 2.5 now.
It was like 1-to-1. No. You're good if you're a 1-to-1. You're a good quarterback. That's why when people bring up the Joe Namath numbers and they go nuts because he had so many interceptions. It's like, yeah, we're in a different era, guys.
And then the NFL average now is 2.3. we've talked before about how interceptions aren't a bad thing. And the obvious example is if you're down a touchdown late in the game, like you don't want to dink and dunk. You got to chuck the ball down the field. If you throw an interception while you're up 7 late in the game, then that's a problem, right? So it's situation dependent, obviously. But I love the idea, right? If you're going to play 2 high safeties, make that safety work. Throw it up the sideline. I'm thinking back to, the Aaron Rodgers to Alan Lazard on that Monday night game against San Francisco. Like throws like that. Yeah, you're going to get more interceptions, but I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I would agree with that. And again, just part of the evolution of what offensive coordinators are going to do. Because at the end of the day, if at the end of the day you're scoring more points than you're not, then.
But our offenses, are they woke to the fact that interceptions are not maybe as bad as they think they're? I mean, my thing has always been sacks versus interceptions. Like the NFL cumulatively has gotten to the point over the last several years as interception rates have gone down that like more value is lost via sack than via interception. And let's just face it, when you're watching the game, is the guy who takes 4 questionable-ish sacks getting benched, or is the guy who throws 3 interceptions getting benched? I mean, it's probably the second guy who's getting benched more often. Quarterbacks, like famously, like running quarterbacks, Chase Stewart did a study about this a number of years ago about how like insanely low the Tyrod Taylors, Colin Kaepernick's, others, their interception rates were. Partially, he was thinking because, they run the ball, so they don't want to like have a big chunk of negative to take away the grinding up they're going to. But also was partially if teams have less faith in their passing ability, they're going to be more likely maybe to give them the hook, or like a Kirk Cousins who was he a 4th round pick going into the NFL, getting the hook, someone like that. So the question is whether offenses are actually ready mentally to deal with these interceptions, where they've gotten accustomed to the fact that 98 out of 100 times when their quarterback throws the ball, it's not intercepted in the NFL nowadays. And that's just that would be a dramatic effect, even if it goes up to, from 2% interception rate to 3%, or from 3% to 4%, like on a relative basis, they're going to be happening a lot more often.
I do not think the NFL is ready to accept that higher interception rate. And the reason I say that is because it sounds a lot like the 4th down decision making. When you go for it on 4th down, you are offering yourself a much bigger gain. You are also risking a really bad outcome and a really bad loss as well. And that's going to be really similar with more risky passes down the field. So NFL is pretty conservative. It's a lot of conventional wisdom thinking there. So while I like the idea, Kevin, I'm not necessarily sure that it's gonna get hold, but I hope it does, right? I mean,
the thing is, it can go massively wrong in clustered small samples, right? Like you could have one game where
just like exactly like 4th downs, right? If you have a massively bad 4th down performance in a game, what's the Chargers head coach last year who stopped going for it on 4th down?
Staley.
Yeah.
Brandon Staley. Yeah.
Like you had the strategy right the first couple of years. You got talked out of it for whatever reason, and now you're out of the league.
Yeah. I mean, these guys are like, go for it until it doesn't work. Which kind of sounds similar to the Steelers' philosophy on starting Justin Fields this year. It's just start him until it doesn't work, which, we'll see. It could be this week. Okay, let's talk some NFL stuff, okay? Because I got my numbers. I put on my power rankings. You are literally the power rank. So you have I guess if we're power ranking the rankings, yours is a higher power ranking than mine via longer establishment and the actual naming, going all in on the concept. So I got some teams who I'm higher on than the market, lower on the market, things like that. What have you seen through this first couple of weeks of the NFL? Has it changed your mind a lot? Do you think everyone's out in front of them, in front of their skis when they're looking at all these changes that are happening? What are you thinking so far?
I'm thinking a lot of things, right? We got 32 different things to think, and possibly 64 when you look at both the offense and the defense. Let me just give you a couple real quick. Are we still
thinking about the Giants at this point, or have we just stopped thinking about the Giants? I might stop thinking about the Giants.
I've stopped thinking about the Giants personally.
Okay. I don't know if I'm getting to 32. I've really been obsessed. Some teams I can't think about anymore. One of them being the Giants. Go ahead.
One team that I've kind of been obsessed about over the last 13 months is the New York Jets. I thought they were overrated heading into the season, and I'm kind of changing my mind about that. I think we've seen flashes of the old Aaron Rodgers, quick, accurate, pinpoint throws. The results weren't there against San Francisco, but I think the outcome of that game was a little bit fluky. A lot of the underlying statistics were better for the Jets. They're still pretty incredibly healthy on the defensive side of the ball. So I actually like them -6 tonight against New England. I don't know when people are going to listen to that, but New England, I think, is both bad and has just a rash of critical injuries on their team right now. I feel like the market has moved significantly on them, and I just do not feel like it is justified through 2 games. So I guess that's 2 takes. Let me give you a third one. A lot of talk about Miami and Tua Tagovailoa and his head injury. I mean, the poor guy is just made out of glass. I feel really bad for him. I think 31 out of 32 NFL quarterbacks get up from that interaction he had in Buffalo last Thursday night, and unfortunately he's out with a concussion. I do feel like that hides something else, because I think the Miami defense is still going to be bad this year. They were bad last year with Vic Fangio. I just don't see a lot of improvements. They have Jalen Ramsey back. I'm not sure he's the same player that he was. Bradley Chubb won't be back until October. Jalen Phillips has been fine, the pass rushers. But I'm not optimistic about that unit. And then, I don't see Tua coming back. So I think their season really could go south really fast.
I've already been wrong on part of the Tua thing. I mean, I think optically, it's the most troubling situation for the NFL. So maybe I should have expected that, normal protocols would be extremely cautious at this point when it came to Tua, because of everything that happened 2 years ago, where he had the wobbly back injury, which wasn't labeled a concussion, and then the next week he was out on the field. Although, the sack that he took and the official concussion he had in Cincinnati that year, I think 99 out of 100 quarterbacks get a concussion on that play.
Yes,
he was just picked
absolutely.
up. He was just picked up and slammed on his back. So, I don't know if you could really point to some pre-existing weakness that he had, causing the severity of that concussion. It was pretty bad. Whereas this one actually wasn't that bad. So I actually thought that, I didn't think he would go to IR. I thought maybe they would take a couple of weeks and then he would end up coming back, just because of the fact that, while quarterbacks, there haven't been a lot of quarterbacks with this many concussions, there have been other players who have come back and been okay after that. So I've already been wrong on that.
Well, I would say that if this was his first concussion, there's no way he'd be on IR.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, he didn't have any concussions last year too. So I think, there has been a gap. But I mean, these are, random events tend to look like they're clustering, even if there's no reason for them to be clustering. So, but I think PR wise, it's just the NFL, with everyone talking about him retiring and this and that, they probably want to hold him out. And same thing when it comes to the Dolphins. I'm interested in the Patriots, because I have them about equal-ish with the market. I liked them last week against the Seahawks, and I think going to overtime was pretty decent for them. I guess the question is really what do we think about Jacoby Brissett? Because maybe too much in my numbers is bleeding through that first half of 2022 that he had when he was subbing in for Deshaun Watson, where he actually looked pretty good. Maybe that was more of an aberration, though, than being a real thing that we can project going forward.
I think Jacoby Brissett is really solid. This is exactly one of those guys that, if you're the Green Bay Packers, how do you not go all out to have someone like that to back up with Jordan Love? I think he's maybe the best backup one of the best backups in the NFL, borderline starter. He's not the reason that I'm down on New England. I think he's a great asset. If Drake May were starting, I think they'd be really bad. But you look at, Kendrick Bourne is out. Hunter Henry is leading them in targets through 2 games. They've also had a lot of explosive run plays on offense as well. I've written down on my little list.
Brissett's had some good scrambles. Talk about scrambling. He's had some high value scrambles. They haven't been explosive. I don't know if you want to call them explosive, but they've been high EPA, third down conversion types of scrambles.
And I do need to kind of separate that out, right? When I'm doing my analysis, like running back runs of 10
Did
or
you
more
see when
yards
Gerard
versus
Mayo
quarterback.
said that his running, he was surprised because he's the slowest black quarterback he's ever seen or something like
Oh
that?
my God, are you serious?
Yeah.
You imagine a
That's
white coach
hilarious.
saying that?
I know.
That would be-
It might be funny. It might still be funny. Honestly, it's like the opposite of deceptively fast. He's like Byron Leftwich. It's like Byron Leftwich or something. But people used to be like, "Oh, he can run." I'm like, "No, he can't." Byron Leftwich cannot run the ball.
They are down to their. They're going to be down to their third option at left tackle tonight as well. I mean, heading back into the preseason, the guy that was supposed to start got benched, and then the backup is out tonight. Christian Barmore's out on the defensive line. This is a team that. Where do you have them in your market-based stuff? I mean, like bottom 5 at best.
You're talking about
right?
the Patriots?
Patriots, yeah.
4. Yes, 6th worst.
Interesting. I mean, they were.
I have the Dolphins below them with Skylar Thompson, so like that's part of them.
Wow.
They get bumped up because of Skylar Thompson. Skylar Thompson. Let me just. I have to lament that a little bit. I liked him coming out and then he didn't get drafted until the 7th round. And I was like, that's not good. And then he looked fantastic during the preseason. I was like, I was already marking my W. I was already taking a W. And then every single time that he's played during the regular season, it's been absolute trash. It's been like beyond bad. So I don't know what to.
Well, what about the playoffs 2 years ago?
knocked him down.
They almost won that playoff game 2 years ago, right? Against Buffalo.
Yeah, he wasn't good.
Competitive for a while.
Yeah, he wasn't. He wasn't good though. So that's why I have the Panthers, the Commanders, the Giants, the Broncos, and the Dolphins below them. But then I have the Patriots next.
I run a wisdom of crowds model in the preseason. It is basically the dumbest thing that you can possibly imagine, looking at subjective power rankings of sports writers. But what I found is it's ridiculously accurate spread-wise the first 6 weeks of the season. It's about
really
54. Yeah,
for sports writers and stuff. Because I would say like, don't they just type the record, type win losses into a Google sheet and sort, and then that's their power rankings?
Sometimes, but when you look at stuff from the previous year, you got to put a little bit of thought, because I try to, in my infinite wisdom, Kevin, I try to only look at sports writers that write at least a couple sentences about every team before they rank them. So hopefully there's a little bit of thought. And I feel like there was, San Francisco was pretty close to Kansas City this year. And so you at least have to put the thought in that, like, Brock Purdy's on a rookie contract. They're spreading a lot of that money on other parts of the roster, and they should be competitive as another Super Bowl contender. It's a really powerful model, and I didn't invent this. Nate Silver's been doing this, using the preseason AP poll as one of his predictors for March Madness for years, and I thought that was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard until I started applying the same ideas in the NFL. Actually looked at the accuracy. I did not think it was going to be worthwhile spread wise, but the results are remarkable for the first 6 weeks of the season. This is something I talk about in the 60-minute guide to the 2024 football season. It's an audiobook that I published recently. So if you're interested, you can check that out. But I just think there's a lot of teams that New England was dead last, like below Carolina in those numbers. And I'm not ready to move off that. I think part of the reason they're so low is I think at that point, I take all these numbers the week before the start of the season, and I'm guessing the fact that Bourne was out, the fact that Barmore was out was known, although I think those guys are going to be back possibly in October, as soon as October. But it is I think they have done well so far, obviously, with the results, but I think the more likely explanation is that Cincinnati just had a bad week 1, and that, I don't know, that, say out of 1 week 2, it was tight.
Is Bucky Brooks part of your wisdom of crowds model? I brought him up here if you want to see this.
So.
He has the Saints
Kevin, we
at number 2.
So, these sports writers,
Vikings
they're
at
no
number
longer
4.
useful. they're no longer useful once the season starts, and then the teams that win go up, and
No,
the
I just
teams
wanted
that
to bring this
drop-
up because it made me think about how the Saints are number 2, the Vikings are number 4, and the Bucks are number 8 on the Bucky.
So are you? But let's talk about the Saints. Are you
Yeah.
buying them? Because I'm still
Okay, here's what's weird about the Saints, right? So I run all these numbers, and then I was comparing them to the market. But the thing is, I do it on Tuesday, so that some of the numbers kind of suck on Tuesday. And I'm just stealing stuff from this unpredictable website where they like power rank based upon the betting markets. Where I probably should be just pulling it and doing it myself, but I'm lazy.
You can just
But
take
I'm
my
not sure
stuff.
I'm not
I
sure
can
they
take
were
my
up to
stuff,
date
man.
on Tuesday. So I looked at it. I put together the Saints, and the Saints came out in 10th by my rankings. Now, it gets a little compacted there in the middle. So it's not like 10th is not as close to first as it is to 20th, right?
Sure.
So I'm looking at it and I'm like, I don't know, man, that seems pretty high. Like, should they really be a top 10 team? Like narratively, that sounds pretty high. And then the markets now, actually, let me look at it just to make sure, because it could have already flipped since then. But then now the betting market numbers that were up as of yesterday, late yesterday, have the Saints at 9th. They're actually a little bit higher by the market than they were by me. So I thought I was ahead of the market. I'm actually behind the market. And I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm of two minds on this. You don't want to overreact, but at the same point in time, I don't like it when people say, "Oh, they beat the Panthers, so like that doesn't count." I'm sorry, you
Right.
beat anyone by 37 points,
Right.
like that counts. Like, what do you
And
want
then
them to
you
do?
did it-
Win by 100? Like
and then
what
you
else
did
can
it
they do?
again. You did it again against Dallas, and no one
And
thinks
then you beat
Dallas is
Dallas,
Carolina.
which is like a legitimate team. That was really the flipping point for me. So I'm still there. I mean, I don't think Derek Carr is going to end up being the most efficient quarterback in the NFL, despite his 6 MVP votes back in 2016. Shout out to Carr, more MVP votes than Russell Wilson. So like I have them in the top 10, but I'm not getting way ahead of myself on that one. So that was one I was going to ask you about. I was also going to ask you about the Cardinals and the Bucks, or another couple that I'm wondering about.
Let's just one more thought about New Orleans. I spent a lot of time about a year ago talking about how the Houston Texans' success was kind of unsustainable, small sample size, rookie quarterback, yada yada yada. But it turns out that when you bring an assistant in from the Shanahan system, it could potentially work out pretty well. You have that again with Clint Kubiak going down to New Orleans. I think I've heard that they're running more play action and things that we know are potentially more efficient.
I'm seeing the things. I mean, I get a bit skeptical of it, but sure, why not?
So
can't hurt.
Are they going to continue to score this many points per game? Absolutely not. But is there some signal on what we've seen? Probably. And you have to be. I think because we have respect for Mike Shanahan and Kyle Shanahan, what he's doing in San Francisco, and we've seen his assistants go off and do good things as coordinators. I do think there's some signal there, right? So New Orleans is a 2.5 point favorite against Philly. I would have made Philly a 5.5 point favorite in the preseason. Markets probably would have been like 4.5. So, I mean, we can talk about Philly as well but that's a big shift, right? And it feels too big, but I'm not sure.
What's interesting about Carr is that I feel like he's solidly, your average-ish sort of quarterback, but he has been someone who in spurts, again, this 2016 season that we're talking about, where he got these MVP votes, where the Raiders went 12-3 in his 15 starts, but then also a couple of other years he had in Oakland before, he got a contract and then things kind of fell off. He had, top 10-ish efficiency those years. Like, he has been someone where if you put the right things around him, he can be pretty good. So like, it's not a situation where he's playing vastly beyond he's playing beyond his ceiling now because he's like the most efficient quarterback in the NFL. But saying they'll have like a top 10 offense is not outside of the range of outcomes that we've already seen from Derek Carr multiple times. So I can buy it somewhat.
Yep. I've always been a Derek Carr truther. Obviously not every season, but probably a little bit unfair to get run out of Las Vegas, Oakland, wherever they were.
It was a strange situation because everyone was so high on him. And then like 2 years later, they're running him out of town. So, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
But
What about well, okay, the Bucks first, maybe, because I'll just say straight up that my numbers have been more skeptical of the Bucks' results than what has happened so far. I mean, they beat like the Commanders, who kind of stink, might have the worst defense in the NFL by my numbers, and then I
Right.
have the Lions as probably being a better team than the Bucks in their latest victory. So I'm not super down on the Bucks, but I have them being a slightly below average team. Where again, you have these power rankings, seeing them at 2-0, beating the Lions, who were a very highly ranked team going into the year, and people are like, oh, they should be a top 10 team. And I'm not quite buying it as much as I'm buying the Saints.
yeah, there's no way Tampa Bay is a top 10 team in my mind. I had them 19th in the preseason. Obviously, we've seen some good results, but as you mentioned, the game in Detroit last week was a little bit fluky. Lions were able to move the ball, just couldn't put it in the end zone. Goff had a pick pretty late in that game.
It was a massive pick. I think it was a 1st and 10 pick. So again, when we're talking about picks, like where you start off with the expected points added, right? So you don't want to throw picks when you're in a high expected points position, and that's what Goff did on that one.
Yeah, Baker Mayfield is one of the worst at potentially throwing interceptions. So for predicting interceptions, I look at both not only interceptions but passes defended as well. And when you look over the last 3 seasons, Baker Mayfield, is essentially the worst quarterback that's thrown a significant number of pass attempts.
I mean, he's never really shown the sustained highs that Carr has also as a passer.
Right.
So,
I mean, I think he peaked in that playoff game against the Steelers. Got hurt.
Yeah. I mean, he was good last year, but again, you got to have some pretty good surroundings and a really, really easy schedule for him last year. So, yeah.
And that's part of the thing. Like last year, he was good. But did it look extra good? Well, look, they played in a terrible division. They made the playoffs, played a Philadelphia team that we still don't really have any idea what was going on towards the end of last season. And, a lot of my numbers suggest that, Baker got pretty lucky with picks last year in terms of the number of balls that got put into dangerous situations. Not a lot of them turned into interceptions. And I don't think they're good. They're not a top 10 team for me.
Yeah, I mean, Baker goes from something like 2nd and 3rd in unadjusted efficiency for me down to the middle of the pack when you take away some of the more luckier elements of quarterback play so far this year.
And that just makes more sense to me.
Yeah. How about the Cardinals here? Because I'm wondering if I could be low on the Cardinals in a way. Well, I mean, they lose in a pretty competitive game against Buffalo. I have them being a straight average team, but I'm wondering for my numbers for Kyler Murray, whether or not what we saw for kind of like half a season and then half a season the last couple of years is really that meaningful, because it was a shit show of a team / injury recovery coming into play. Whereas if you go back further than that, numbers that get like kind of decayed significantly in my predictive ability, but maybe like when he was the 10th or the 12th most efficient quarterback in the league those couple of years, maybe that's more like reality than the down years that we saw more recently.
Right. I think this is a great question. I loved Rams plus 1.5 or whatever. I could not believe the Cardinals were favorite. I
didn't buy the injuries would be enough, and I guess they were enough.
Yeah, or Arizona's good.
True.
But I ate a ton of crow on that one, and it's I don't know. I mean, Kyler Murray was great, and as you mentioned, he's been not so good the last couple of years. 2021 was that year. Weren't they like 7-1 or 8-1? Eventually made the playoffs. Folded pretty badly, I think, against the Rams, if I remember correctly. I think that was the season. I don't see a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. There's been, I think it's been a consensus among people who follow this stuff that roster is not good. The defense, I still don't think is very good. I think we'll eventually see that more. But, I think a lot can happen early in the season, right? Marvin Harrison Jr. looked like a complete flop week 1 and then completely busts out week 2. So what's going on there? I don't know. We'll see. I think I was very down on Arizona. I'm rethinking that. And, I actually have Detroit -3 at Arizona written down on my little sheet because my number's like that, but we'll see. Well, I haven't made a final decision on that.
Okay, one last team that's performing well that I don't trust my own numbers on before we get over to some of the teams that are not performing well. Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Viking. Are you part of Darnold Hive? Because the numbers look pretty good so far for him. Even by like the
Right.
adjustments, they look pretty good. Yet we have a vast accumulation of awful performance in the past that kind of anchors some of my expectations for him. Even with all that said, their defense was actually okay last year. They had some unlucky losses early in the year when Kirk Cousins was kind of balling out, but he had some unlucky interceptions, tipped balls, things like that ended up happening. So I have them being an above average team right now, above some teams like the Cowboys, where it doesn't feel good. I'm not happy about this. But that's where the numbers are right now. So Darnold will probably just crumble, and then I'll have to rank them back down again. But what are you thinking about the Vikings?
Well, as a Stanford guy, I'm still scarred by how badly Sam Darnold killed us when he was at USC that 1 year. So everything I'm going to say is going to be pretty biased, obviously. Actually, I hope not. But I'm not buying it. I think he's good. I think he's good enough to start the entire year. I can't remember. I think that was not no. So I think he's good enough to start. But you get a 97-yard touchdown to Justin Jefferson last week. That obviously helps the numbers. They've had 10 rushes of 10 or more yards this season. I wrote that down as something that's fluky and unsustainable. So I am personally not buying Minnesota. I'm not sure that defense is very good either. I differ in my opinions on Minnesota than other people I respect. I know some people that I respect really like them coming into the season, and that so far looks pretty good at 2-0. But they're only a 2-point dog against Houston, and Justin Jefferson is questionable. So that's another game I have written down. I haven't made a final decision about. But I would probably be fading Sam Darnold right now. I mean, I tend to fade Minnesota in general because I just don't like the team. I don't think the team is that good. But for Darnold in particular.
All right, let's look at the other side. So Ravens, the Ravens flock, not going so hot right now. And you can excuse a loss against Kansas City, right, on opening game. A loss at home to the Raiders, not good. So, I don't think they perform that poorly, but in a contextual sort of environment where at worst they should be 1-1 right now. If you look at the schedule that they had coming into the season and they're 0-2, it doesn't look so great. I still have them. I was kind of lower on the market anyway than them coming into the year. So I have them at 5th here. I think the market has them at 3rd or 4th, pretty close to the Bills. I have them a little bit worse than the Bills here. So the market's moved even less than I have, but it's weird because we flipped with the Ravens where a lot of people were yelling at me for being low on the Ravens a week or two ago. And now people are yelling at me for being high on the Ravens because they're 0-2 and I haven't moved them far enough. So maybe it's the same people. I haven't checked the Twitter handles to see, but it's possible it's the same exact people.
I mean, I think just it's just like with Cincinnati, it's important not to flip out too much with Baltimore. I'm looking at the box score. They did have more yards than Las Vegas, and any given Sunday stuff happens in the NFL. I do question whether they can sustain the defensive performance from last year. I try not to make too many things about coaches, but having Mike Macdonald, just an extraordinary defense last year. A lot of same personnel. Really haven't seen when I look at the success rate that they've allowed. It hasn't been good. So are there changes? They had that bust, the opening night where they let Worthy get behind them and score a touchdown for Kansas City. Is that a fluke or are things different with the coordinator change on that Ravens defense? That's something I'm keeping an eye on. I think the offense is going to be fine. I don't think they played badly against Kansas City week 1. Obviously could have won the game, could have tied that game with the play towards the end there. Maybe give them a 1-week pass against Las Vegas, but we'll see. I'm not ready to downgrade them too much yet.
I mean, I'm already ready for whatever the Monday morning take shows are going to have to say, because they're going to have something to say, because either the Ravens are going to be 0-3 or the Cowboys are going to be 1-2, losing at home to the Ravens. So these guys, they're rubbing their hands over there for what the takes are going to be about who's dead. The Ravens are dead, or the Cowboys. They'll probably declare the Cowboys dead at 1-2 also. So they're going to have something to talk about there, and that should be fun. How are you feeling about the Cowboys? I guess we should talk about them. My numbers are lower on them than the market quite substantially, but they have been most of the year, maybe not believing in the defense quite as much as what their headline numbers were last year due to turnover reliance for a couple of years now versus some others. What do you think about the Cowboys?
Yeah, I mean, we got to remember they smacked around Cleveland, and is that because they're good or Cleveland's really bad and Deshaun Watson's really bad? And then they met the hottest team in the NFL week 2. So, yeah, I mean, this is the point in the season where I really do try to stick with my preseason prior, unless we know something is seriously wrong, like with a Miami team that doesn't have their quarterback anymore. So I think with Dallas, like they are, I think they still are what I thought preseason, which is like a playoff team, but not one that's going to go particularly far, right? Above average, but need to play well to be significantly within the top 10 in the NFL.
Yeah, it's rough for the Ravens though, because if you're like the Bengals, at least you're playing against the Commanders, at home. If you're one of these other like struggling teams, who else is really struggling? The Eagles. Some of the Eagles have the Saints, so that'll be interesting. Interesting one that's going on there. But then you got to go to Dallas. That sounds a little bit rough. Okay. Last one I want to talk about, because these are ones I can't figure out myself. So I try to pick your brain for ones I can't figure out. So Caleb Williams, I was low on the Bears coming into the season. Their defense was really good in the second half of last year, but defensive performance can be a little bit a high variance, obviously. I'm lower on rookies just generally. I wasn't like giving Caleb Williams some bump that maybe some others were giving him as being like a number 1 plus sort of number 1 overall pick and even better, and the great surroundings. We kind of didn't know those things. They can't run the ball for anything. So that has not helped him, including the turnovers he's had. So I'm still a little bit lower on them right now. And then we have them going to face the Colts. They're a couple of point underdog, but it's actually pretty close for a Colts team that's also struggling here. I don't know. Like, how do you model Caleb Williams when he's been one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL by the numbers, but yet he's the number 1 pick? So maybe these are like some growing pain sort of situations for what will happen going forward.
I'm not sure it means much that you're the number 1 pick, especially when you're a rookie. You just look at past number 1 picks, and it's not like you're certainly not gifted. There's certainly no guarantee that you're going to be a top 10 quarterback your rookie year or ever, right? So yes. He looks like he is still getting used to the speed of play in the NFL. And again, as you mentioned, defensive performance tends to be pretty volatile. I do like some of the pieces they have on that side of the ball. But coming into the preseason, they were considered NFL average, like right at NFL average. And I thought that was kind of a ceiling projection for the Chicago team. I think a lot of that came in. A lot of that was because of the hype that, hey, Caleb Williams has the best receiver situation that any rookie quarterback has ever had. And DJ Moore is fantastic. And Rome Odunze could be a fantastic rookie wide receiver. But and who else do they have? Keenan Allen, right?
Yeah, I guess he's not really. Yeah, he's dropping balls, and he's looking. Might not have been the most judicious use of draft capital to go ahead and make that trade, but it is what it is.
So I kind of wasn't buying that hype coming in. They're probably, I think they're a below average team, and but it's also something like I also don't think Caleb Williams is quite this bad. Like, he will eventually throw a touchdown. They'll get, I think he'll get better, but I think the expectations were a little bit high coming into the season.
Yeah. I mean, he did have like a pretty high sack to pressure sort of ratio and things like that maybe showed he holds the ball a little bit too long sometimes, makes some throws where it works in college, it may not work in the NFL all the time. So I mean, there's definitely like some signs that he has more talent than like a Bryce Young or something, but we'll see going forward.
I feel like,
all right, well,
there have been other Lincoln Riley quarterbacks that have figured out that there are things that you can do in college that you can't do in the NFL, and you got to adjust.
Yeah, it's just having that. There's a lot of like instincts. People talk about intelligence or not. I don't think you have to be that smart, right? You don't have to be that smart to be an NFL player. You got to have much better instincts than I have. That's for sure. But
that's an intelligence.
True. I guess it depends on how you define it. I'm talking more like IQ sort of intelligence versus, I don't know how you measure whatever they were measuring with that. What was the company that was measuring Bryce Young versus CJ Stroud? Whatever they were measuring, obviously didn't end up working out quite so hot for them.
I mean, I do think that's kind of a fundamental problem in our society, right? Like IQ, like book learning. Yeah, it's important, but it's far from the only thing that's important to be successful in this world. And I think intelligence should be a much broader term. Like it should not ever be restricted to any kind of test.
I agree, except for when my son's trying to get into college, then he's got to study the hell out of that SAT test. All right, which has made a comeback. Ed, thank you for joining me. Let me make sure we got the plug on here. We got to get Power Rank up here. The website. I'll let you make a plug for the site here. All this different work that you're doing right now. Oh, you got a picture of your. Looks like you got a picture of your younger brother on here too. I like that. Just kidding. A little bit old picture of.
I was actually just my go-to joke. It was like
that's my go-to joke for these situations.
No, that was awesome. I was actually just thinking. I was like, man, I don't look too decrepit right now compared to that picture that must have been. Oh, I don't know.
No, you're looking good. You're looking good. No grays, no gray hair, which is because I'm lucky. I'm blonde, so like it doesn't really show up as much. But yeah, you're looking good. All right, give me the elevator pitch.
Yeah, I run the powerrank.com. I do quantitative football predictions to help bettors win more bets. It all started with spread predictions. There's some on my site, but I save my best predictions for members of the site. And then I've also been doing NFL prop bets as well. I did really well with interceptions last year. The market's completely changed this year, so I'm not exactly sure how that's going to go. I don't think there's going to be quite the volume. So we might have to pivot into other things. But yeah, so that's what I do over at the Power Rank. Also just published the 60-minute guide to the 2024 football season. It is basically 2 book chapters of the football analytics and betting book that I will never finish. I talk about how to predict interceptions. I talked a little bit about that with Baker Mayfield here and how his interception numbers were way better than they should have last year. And then also the wisdom of crowds in making NFL spread predictions. So you can check that out. Go to the powerrank.us. A lot of you will be able to actually listen to that for free on Spotify if you have certain plans. So if you go to that URL, you can check that out.
Yeah, I got it up on the screen here for those watching on YouTube from Ed's Twitter or X. I can't say that. I can't do the X thing. At the Power Rank, his pinned tweet, you'll see the 60-minute guide and link and all that stuff right there. All right, my man. We've done it all. We've said it all. We fixed passing. We fixed NFL passing, and
that's a huge accomplishment for an hour.
That was pretty good, and we nailed every correct predictions on every single team and their strength going forward. So I appreciate you joining me for this exercise. For anyone listening, I'll be back at you next Tuesday afternoon with the live stream with Josh Hermsmeyer. And like I said, I think I previewed here that I'm also going to talk to Cody Alexander probably on Tuesday, and then maybe publish that on Wednesday, where I'll pick his brain and he'll shoot down every single idea that I have for how to fix the NFL passing game. Until then, go out there, subscribe to Ed's newsletter, go ahead and follow him on Twitter. Otherwise, I'll be talking at everyone next week. Thanks so much.